All right, how's everybody doing tonight? It's been a crazy day, but welcome to my channel, and hopefully I'll keep it together well enough to get through this video. Today is the 371st video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. This was a theory that was originated by Dewey Bernard Larson back in the 20th century. He died back in 1990. He put out his first two fundamental postulates about the reciprocal system in 1959 or so. And then he took those two postulates and he put them through a process of deduction, where he basically said, if this, then that, if this, then that. And so if my two postulates are correct, this is what the universe would look like. So he basically derived a theoretical universe from his two initial postulates. And then in his books, he compared his his theoretical universe with the so-called actual universe that was observed and measured by the legacy scientists in their laboratories and expounded on their scientific tables. And Larson compared those, and the comparison was very favorable in many, almost all cases. Larson was able to predict the many incredibly detailed aspects about the universe to 1/10 of a 1% accuracy. We will eventually be looking at his book, Basic Properties of Matter, where Larson is able to pinpoint the many of the basic properties of matter strictly from theoretically, to compare to the scientific tables in terms of, all kinds of basic properties like the melting and boiling points and the specific heat and the compressibility and the valence and electric qualities as well, and also in the field of astronomy, he does the same thing. And in many cases, when he doesn't get the same answers, he shows why. And in general, he shows why his answers are better than the answers that are given by the scientific community. Shows how their data are incorrect. Now, the basic idea behind Larson's reciprocal system is laid out mostly in his first fundamental postulate. The universe is composed of entirely of one component, motion. And motion is, the universe is composed entirely of one component, motion, existing in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. And then the second postulate is that the universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Now let's put aside that second postulate and dig in a little deeper on the first postulate. Larson is saying that the universe is made out of motion, not matter, not energy, not force, but motion. And in fact, matter, energy, and force are all kinds of motion. For Larson, motion is the relationship between space and time. Motion can be expressed as a fraction, with space or time as the numerator and time or space as the denominator. For example, speed Speed is space over time. The bicycle is moving at 15 miles per hour. 15 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Speed, space over time. Matter, energy, and force are all in the same way, expressible through fractions of space and time. Energy is actually the inverse of speed. Speed is space over time. Energy is time over space. It took me 2 hours to push that thing 1 mile. 2 hours of time in 1 mile of space. Time over space. Matter is time to the third power over space to the third power. Force is time over space to the second power. Pressure is time over space to the fourth power. Acceleration is space over time to the second power. Electrical capacitance is space to the third power over time. Although Larson derived a different value, that value that I'm giving you is actually from Dr. Bruce Perret and one of his revisions of the reciprocal system. Dr. Perret called that the RS2, the reciprocal system 2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system, where he stays within the spirit of the reciprocal system, but corrects some of the errors that Larson admitted that he was, could have made. Larson, said that the theory itself is correct, but whether I have derived everything correctly is a different matter. And if I didn't, eventually those things will be corrected. And Perret did correct the capacitance, electrical capacitance. But the point is that all of our basic scientific quantities can be expressible exclusively in time-space terms. Now, when Larson and time over space, they're all different kinds of motion. Now, when Larson says motion, he means something a little bit different than what scientists generally think of. Scientists are usually thinking about velocity with motion, with speed, a motion that has a magnitude and a direction. Larson is talking about what he calls a scalar motion, a motion that has a magnitude but has no direction. This is something that you can envision using a balloon with dots on it. If you blow up the balloon, all of the dots are moving away from each other. But they're not moving in any specific direction. The same is true about time. Time is always getting later and later and later and later, but not in any specific direction. That's what Larson calls clock time. Clock space is that space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart, but in no specific direction, in the manner of the dots on an expanding balloon. And really, not even the dots. All locations on the expanding balloon are moving away from each other. So that's what Larson calls clock space. Now, there is also what Larson calls coordinate space and coordinate time. This is the three-dimensionality of time that he talks about in the first postulate. The universe is made out of motion, and motion exists in 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions of space, 3 dimensions of time, 3 dimensions of motion. Now, we generally understand space to be 3-dimensional, x, y, z coordinates, volume. And we perceive space to be 3-dimensional. Now, because of the reciprocal postulates, that also means that time is 3-dimensional, because that's really the definition of a reciprocal. A reciprocal if one of the reciprocals has a quality, the other one also has that same quality. Just think of the reciprocal of 4. The reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. 4 over 1 and 1 over 4. But they are in different orders in that fraction. One is the numerator, the other is the denominator, depending on which one you're talking about. And the same is true about all qualities of reciprocals. They all have the same qualities. So if we can determine and observe that space has 3 dimensions or multidimensional XYZ coordinates in Euclidean, then we would also be able to see that time has 3 dimensions as well. So Larson calls that coordinate space and coordinate time. And then time and space both exist in discrete units, meaning that there is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. Quanta, they are quantized. There is in space, that number is 4.56 times 10 to the minus 8 meters, which I believe works out to about 1/500,000th of an inch. And then in time, that is 1.52 times 10 to the minus 16 seconds. And so that is a very short period of time, 1/6 quadrillionth of a second. And if you don't have a full unit, then you don't have anything. And then if you don't have a second unit, then you only have one. If you don't have a third unit, then you don't only have 2, and so on. And if you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. So the speed of light is what Larson calls unit speed. 1 over 1 equals 1. And so unit speed for Larson is really the 0 point of his universe of motion, which makes sense. If you think that you have a universe of motion, then you have motion is all omnipresent. It's always there. And there is no place where you don't have motion. And the motion at the in Larson's universe, the motion at the speed of light outward in all directions is the 0 point, or the null point, or the reference point, the ether, the origin, the state of rest of this universe. And that also means that it is just like all reciprocals, 1 is at the center. 1 is what you get when you multiply space over time times time over space. You get 1. And so it is at the center, meaning that half of the universe is moving slower than the speed of light, and the other half of the universe is moving faster than the speed of light. Those are what Larson calls the material sector and the cosmic sector, respectively. Now, the legacy scientists know all about the material sector, but they know very little about the cosmic sector, evidenced by Einstein's dictum that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. In Larson's universe, the speed of light is the midpoint. And so this cosmic sector is a mystery to the legacy scientists. But it doesn't have to be, because they have measured out the material sector, and by the reciprocal postulate, the cosmic sector is identical to the material sector, except that the orders of space and time are reversed. So in the material sector, you have coordinate space, 3 dimensions of space, and clock time. Time is always getting later and later and later. But in the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time, 3 dimensions of time, and you have clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And so that's basically how the reciprocal system works. And Dr. Perret, among others, have disputed the nature of the second postulate. We've talked about that a little bit in the past, and will do more in the future. But today we are wrapping up reading this article written by Dr. Perret, who also passed away in 2020. And he writes under the pen name Daniel Phoenix 3. He's written a lot of articles under the name Bruce Perret also, but when he writes under Daniel Phoenix 3, he's generally writing in a more speculative tone, and he's writing about subjects that are a little bit farther afield from your normal scientific topics that Larson tended to write about. Larson has books on atomic physics and chemistry and astronomy, astrophysics, but he also has books on economics and a lot of chapters in books on metaphysics, philosophy, religion, psychology, biology, ethics. But Perret writes about all kinds of stuff: conspiracy theories, crypto archaeology, Jungian psychology, yin yang, Taoist philosophy, linguistics, dream interpretation. Larson wrote about dream interpretation as well. This particular article is called Space Travel, Science is Fiction. And we started this article yesterday. And so if you want to hear the first half of the article, you want to watch yesterday's video. But today we're going to try to wrap this up. So we're going to start here in the middle of this article. He just got done talking about how he questions whether space travel is possible because in Larson's reciprocal system, life is the result of a material sector unit combining with a cosmic sector unit, combining and being controlled by a cosmic sector unit. And cosmic sector is really, the nature of the cosmic sector is control. Mind, Perret calls it soul. And that we have what he calls a silver cord that connects the body and the mind, or the soul. And that cord breaks if you go too far away from the planet, is what he's saying. And so he's doubting our ability to actually go into space too far beyond a certain distance. That silver cord would be cut, and when that silver cord is cut, death is instantaneous. So that's what we'll take over from right now. But the really big consequence is that all these secret space programs are nothing more than propaganda. Those on the inside know that the Apollo program was just a Hollywood production filmed at Area 51. And the astronauts never went further than Earth orbit. So they could have an appropriate splashdown for the TV cameras. The rest was filmed on a sound stage ahead of time and edited in for the live broadcast. It is starting to appear that the situation is much larger than the faked moon landings. Most of the spacecraft sent out into the solar system were probably faked as well. And what we are seeing for so-called high-res images from these ships are nothing more than good computer graphics modeled after images taken from Earth and orbit-based telescopes. Now, I would also like to mention that Daniel Phoenix 3 claims to have been one of the young computer programmers working on the Montauk project back in the 1980s, early 80s, which was a government top secret time travel program. It's also related to the Philadelphia experiment. And so he's, at least according to his claims, he's not just kind of shooting from the hip here. He was an insider to this, and so he has some inside information according to what he claims. Okay, there is some evidence that a few astronauts may have visited other worlds in our solar system, but they would have to have had special training in ethics and psychology to get over the soul connection issue, which a dedicated explorer would probably have. Man can exist on the moon as it is within range. So he's saying that, the soul silver cord between the soul and the body, it can break if you get too far away from the Earth, but that the moon is within range. So the moon is actually possible to go to, but the rest of the solar system, the rest of the bodies in the solar system are beyond the range. Now, I'm not exactly sure where he gets the idea of what that range actually is, but maybe he'll say it coming up here. Man can exist on the moon as it is within range. Ever since the Philadelphia project, the Black Ops folks have known that you cannot just grab anyone off the street and send them into time and space. Only a very small part of the population can do it, and usually requires someone with developed psionic skills. Of our extraplanetary missions, the only ones I've seen viable evidence for are A, the Nazi scientist orbital mission in the Haunebu, Haunebu, of the 1930s, that was intercepted by a race of peaceful explorers before the ship was destroyed from design flaws, and the occupants given a little tour of the universe before being returned. Their enlightenment resulted in their sabotaging the Nazi spacecraft program. B, one manned trip to the moon in a Bell craft, which was the re-engineered Haunebu, in the late 1950s, where humanity met the Selenites, Selenites, and were told mankind was not welcome there, and don't call us, we'll call you. In reprisal, the United States proposed Project A-119, the Let's Blow Up the Moon project, abandoned in 1959 as unfeasible. And C, one unmanned probe to Mars in 1962 as a joint project between the United States and Russia, with assistance from Germany, England, and France. While at Montauk, I was recruited into their version of the Psi Corps. That's PSI Corps, like psychic, psionics. The Psi Corps, popularized on Babylon 5, a far better show than the Big Bang Theory, because they were actively seeking technical people with engineering and computer skills that possessed psionic ability, who could be developed and enhanced to their needs. I never got far enough into the program to discover their ultimate objectives, but getting past the quarantine may well have been one of them. So our world leaders, rather than saying to humanity, hey, we're all trapped here until we grow up, then get caught with their hands in the idiocracy jar, decided to fake it and distort astronomical data to make the universe large, huge, and unreachable by man in the foreseeable future. Convert the nearby solar systems, that are light days away into galaxies far, far away, then deny contact from these other nearby civilizations because it is, quote, scientifically impossible for them to get here. Just like T. Henry Morey's patent application that he discussed in yesterday's episode. So here we sit, kicking sand in each other's faces because we feel cut off, alone and isolated from the rest of the universe. Right now, we are cut off and have your illustrious leaders to thank for that with their SM technology, saurian men or dinosaurian men, reptilians, and chemtrail screens. But hey, you voted for them even if you didn't vote, because silence is consent. At least that's what it says in the Uniform Commercial Code that runs every aspect of our legal lives. Perhaps we should change the name of the planet to Ferenginar, which I think is from some science fiction, but I can't quite remember which one. I'm sorry, my alarm clock is going off here, but just ignore that, and it will be over in a few seconds, 45 seconds or something. Yes, this is not professional. The budget for this video is 0, and that's just the way it is. So we can still learn a lot of stuff. Okay. In summary, what has turned up is that the limits of mankind's collective silver cord, the link that bonds his body and soul into a living organism, has a physical extent that is just outside the orbit of the moon. But the New World Order types wanted the moon to themselves, and as a consequence, after making first contact with the Selenite civilizations, got thrown off and told not to come back. And there is nowhere else to go at this time except the space stations that corporations like Bigelow Aerospace are putting so much effort into. Mankind can bark his brains out at the other nearby worlds from here, but it's all bark and no bite, since he cannot get his weapons of destruction past the natural limits of the Earth-Moon system. Man is not yet a threat to the peaceful explorers and will not encounter them until he learns to cut his chains that tie him to the species collective, which must be done by conscious evolution, the opposite direction that the powers that be are leading the species. And the powers that be don't like being trapped, particularly when they know the entire solar system is evolving, the sun is getting larger and hotter, and things will be changing. So they've got their underground bases, space stations, and chemical screens to block off the natural path to evolution. And we, the humble peasants, are paying the price for it, unless the peasants are revolting, and to these NWO types, they certainly are. If you consider this situation, it is no wonder they enforce all these artificial boundaries of countries, nations, states, counties, districts, fences for the minions. So the one of the one-to-many relationship, the big magnet themselves, can make all the decisions. Though something they may not have considered is that they don't take enough slaves with them when they go into hiding. There may not be sufficient, if they don't take enough slaves with them into hiding, there may not be sufficient bioenergy to keep the group mind functioning, and they won't survive either. We have seen species extinctions before when the population size reaches a low point, And I cannot see why that law of nature would omit mankind. But I live in hope. There may come a time soon that the true seekers may feel that they lose their soul. But in reality, they are just cutting their chains, getting ready for the next stage of evolution, the tomorrow people, Homo sapiens ethicus, ready to individuate from the Anunnaki-created human collective and move out into space to join the peaceful explorers of the universe. But understand, it is not a handout. You have to work for your evolution. Hope porn is every bit as bad as fear porn. Okay, that is the end of that article, and that is called Space Travel, Science is Fiction, and that was written by Daniel Phoenix 3. I was hoping that I would find the date on that paper, but I know that Dr. Perrett died in 2020, and I believe he probably wrote this in the 2010s sometime, but not sure when. But it was a fair amount of time ago, and so what he's saying is pretty prescient. He didn't know about certain medical procedures that have been injected into the situation, so to speak, and some other things that are similar that have happened over the last few years. But he certainly seems to be speaking in a way that makes sense to what's going on now. I don't know whether he's correct or not. And the main reason I'm looking at the article is to show how you can use the reciprocal system to come up with some conclusions about things in any field. And I think that Perrett does a great job of stretching the reciprocal system and really showing how you can use it if you understand it well enough. Okay, well, so that does it for today's video. Tomorrow we have a new reading, and I think we're going to stay with the reciprocal system some more, but I'm not sure where we're headed, but we will find out tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in.